I spent most of my life pouring everything I had into other people. Love, time, money, even pieces of myself. Until one night, standing over a table full of food I had paid for and prepared, I heard something that broke me in a way I never expected. This isn't just some story about being humiliated. It's the story of finally waking up. And if you've ever felt like you were fading into the wallpaper of your own home, then this story might be yours too. I still hear the soft clinking of wine glasses, the distant sound of jazz drifting through the house I bought, and the smell of roast chicken I'd seasoned that morning before running all over town for a dinner I hadn't even been invited to. But I was there because Emily forgot to mention, again, that her parents were coming and the house had to look spotless, again. I should have taken the hint. I should have known the moment her mother gave me that half smile and asked, "And you are?" Like I didn't belong. Emily didn't even hesitate. She let out this little laugh and said, "Oh, that's Linda, kind of like our unofficial housemaid. She keeps everything going around here." The room burst out laughing, even my son Jason. I stood there frozen, holding the empty wine bottle I had just brought up from the basement, forcing a polite smile like I hadn't just felt the ground drop out from under me. I excused myself quietly, set the bottle on the counter and walked away back to the bedroom I helped renovate when we first moved in. They kept laughing. Not one of them, not even Jason, spoke up, not to correct her, not even to say, "That's my mother." That night, sleep never came. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door I'd painted with my own hands. I remembered the day I signed those mortgage papers when the house became mine. My credit, my savings, my signature. Jason had just graduated. Emily wasn't even in the picture yet. They had nothing. And I gave them everything. Now I was just the help. The next morning I did what I always did. I made coffee. I fed the cat Emily pretended to like. She came downstairs in her yoga leggings, scrolling on her phone, didn't even look at me. I waited. She finally glanced up and I handed her the keys. The front door, the garage, the mailbox. All of them. She frowned and said, "What's this?" I smiled and said, "Good luck with the mortgage." She blinked, confused. "What?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her, down the hallway, past the framed photos I picked out, the furniture I paid for, the walls I painted myself. I didn't take anything. Just my purse and the old coat I wore the day I brought Jason home from the hospital. I didn't even say goodbye. I heard Jason call after me as I stepped out. He ran barefoot down the driveway, but I didn't stop. I didn't slam the car door. I closed it gently, calmly. Because something inside me had broken, but not in anger. It wasn't sadness either. It was clarity. And clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't plead. It just settles in and tells you the truth. And that morning I knew I was finished. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew exactly where I wasn't staying. In my rearview mirror I saw Jason standing in the driveway, stunned. He had no idea what he'd just lost. Honestly, neither did I. They say you don't realize you were drowning until you finally come up for air. That first night in the tiny apartment left to me by my great-aunt Helen, it didn't feel like freedom. Not yet. Just silence. Thick, heavy silence that clung to every surface like dust. The place smelled like age. Old wood floors, faded wallpaper, a heater that moaned like it hadn't worked right since the 70s. I dropped my bag on the kitchen table and stood still. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just stood there staring at the chipped tile, thinking about the place I had just walked away from. But it wasn't my home anymore. Not really. For the next few days I moved around like a shadow. Slept on the couch because the bed frame was broken. Ate peanut butter sandwiches and microwaved soup. I didn't call anyone. Not because there was no one, but because no one called me. Jason didn't text, didn't email. Nothing. I figured Emily told him not to, or worse, maybe he just didn't care. I kept replaying that night in my head, the way they laughed, the way he laughed. I raised that boy by myself after his father left. I gave up everything, my career, my goals, just to keep us afloat. I worked night shifts cleaning motel rooms, stocked shelves in the mornings, and used every penny of the inheritance from my parents to buy that house. Never asked him for rent. Not once. And somehow in Emily's world I was just the maid. I started writing at night. In old spiral notebooks I used to buy Jason back in middle school. Page after page, not for anyone else, just for me. I wrote about the things I'd never said. Like how I'd wait in the kitchen just to hear a simple, "Thank you." How I'd cry in the garage when they left me out of dinners. How I'd pretend to sleep so I wouldn't hear them laughing at my TV shows from the living room I paid for. One afternoon, looking for a light bulb in the upstairs storage closet, I found this old metal trunk my Aunt Helen used to keep under her sewing machine. Rusted shut heavy. I forced it open expecting fabric or buttons, but instead it was packed with envelopes. One caught my eye. My name in her handwriting. It was dated almost 30 years ago. It read, "If you're reading this, you've come back. I'm sorry you had to." My heart pounded as I unfolded the pages, yellow and fragile. Inside were hospital forms, notes, and a photo of a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. Not Jason. His name was Michael Thompson. I read the letter 3 times before I understood it. Aunt Helen had been a nurse at the hospital where Jason was born. She said something always felt off. There'd been a last-minute room change, some confusion with the ID tags. By the time anyone realized, the babies were already gone. She never told me. She was scared. But years later she found paperwork, something buried in her old records. A quiet legal settlement from the hospital to another family. That's when she knew Jason wasn't mine. My hands were shaking. Thought I might faint. I looked at that photo, at the name, Michael Thompson. My brain refused to accept it. Because if that baby was my son, then who was Jason? And what was I to him? But the strangest part is I didn't feel angry. Or sad. I felt free. Not because I didn't love Jason. But because suddenly all the years of feeling like I didn't belong started to make sense. That cold distance I always felt from him, it wasn't my imagination. Maybe he felt it too. Maybe he always knew I wasn't really his mother. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy after all. I stayed up the entire night reading every last page from that old trunk. Aunt Helen had saved it all. DNA reports, affidavits, even a tiny article about the Thompson family. They were respected, well-educated, successful. And still living just a few towns over. My real son had been growing up practically next door this whole time. I folded the letters carefully, slid them into a fresh envelope and tucked it into the drawer beside my bed. Then I stood in front of the mirror for what felt like forever. I barely recognized the woman staring back. But for once I didn't feel ashamed of her. She was bruised, yes, but something inside her was finally stirring. And the world had no clue what that meant. There's a kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it punishes. And that's the silence I lived in for weeks after reading Helen's letter. I didn't know what to do with the truth I now carried around like a live wire. Dangerous, buzzing, impossible to ignore. I didn't call Jason. I didn't reach out to Michael. I just existed. I'd wake up, make 1 cup of coffee and stare out the dusty kitchen window trying to make sense of who I was now. The woman who raised Jason. That was a different person. She had been a mom, a wife once, a caretaker, someone who gave everything. But now, I didn't know who I was without all that. One cold evening, the heater broke in the apartment. I wrapped myself in every blanket I owned, lit a candle and curled up on the couch with those hospital records resting in my lap. I must have read through them 100 times. Every date, every form, every doctor's note, everything lined up. It was all true. Michael Thompson had been born the same night as Jason in the same hospital wing, and years later that hospital quietly settled with the real family, hoping the mistake would stay buried. But Helen, before she died, made sure I'd find it. She saved the proof they tried to hide from me. I cried, but not for Jason. I grieved the memories I was never allowed to have with Michael. The birthday cakes, the spelling tests, the hugs after bad days. All those things I thought I was giving to my child. They belonged to someone else. And yet I didn't feel hate for Jason. I had loved him not because of blood but because I chose to. Or I thought I did. But when someone you raise doesn't stand up for you, when they let you be humiliated without a word, that kind of silence cuts deep. It forces you to rethink everything. Then one Tuesday I pulled myself out of it. I wasn't ready to face Jason yet. But I needed to do something. So I started small. I walked downtown and stopped across the street from a cozy little bookstore on the corner of Maple and 4th. The sign above the door read Thompson and Company. Books, painted in a rich forest green. I'd passed by it dozens of times before without ever noticing. But now I couldn't look away. Because he was there. Michael. I didn't need anyone to tell me it was him. He looked about 30, maybe a bit older. Trinket. Come. Reading glasses, gentle eyes. He was helping a young woman find a poetry book, speaking softly, his voice low and kind. His presence was steady, assured. And I just stood there on the opposite sidewalk, heart pounding, tears sliding down my cheeks, soaking into the collar of my coat. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet heartbreak. I didn't go inside that day. I just watched. And the next day I came back and watched again. It became part of my routine. I'd sit on the bench near the corner with a coffee in my hand or pretend to be checking my phone, and I'd quietly witness the life that could have been mine but never was. It wasn't stalking. It was grief. And it was preparation. Because while I sat across from that bookstore, something in me began to click into place. I started learning the rhythm of the place. When deliveries came, who the regulars were, how the day flowed. But it wasn't just Michael I was watching. I began tracking Jason and Emily too. Quietly. I knew their habits, their routines. Emily loved her Instagram, tagging every brunch, yoga class, and overpriced wine bar. It wasn't hard to follow. And the more I saw, the more disgusted I became. They weren't struggling like they claimed. They were putting on a show. Emily's whole coaching business was a front. Rented office, fake followers, everything built on credit. Jason had quit his job half a year ago, and she called it manifesting a new phase. I called it what it was: nonsense. They were living in a house made of lies, and they had no clue how close it was to collapsing. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I began keeping a second notebook. Not like the first one where I poured my feelings onto the pages. This one was clinical. Precise. Names, dates, filings, screenshots. I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was preparing. They thought I had vanished, faded away like I didn't matter. But I was watching. And I was about to show them who I really was. The first time I saw Michael up close, I couldn't speak. It was a rainy Thursday. The shop was nearly empty, and he was rearranging biographies, humming a tune under his breath. I had stayed outside too long, and when he turned toward the window, our eyes met. He gave me a small, polite smile, the kind you give to a stranger. And that's exactly what I was to him. A stranger. My chest ached so deeply I thought I might break right there. I turned away fast, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't fake it for long. I rounded the corner quickly, barely making it to my car before the tears came. How do you tell someone that their whole life started because of a mistake? How do you look a grown man in the eyes and say, "You're not who you think you are, and neither am I"? That night I pulled Helen's letter out again and read it 3 more times. She hadn't just stumbled onto the truth, she had done the digging. The name Michael Thompson wasn't a guess. It was confirmed. She'd found the settlement agreement. The hospital had kept everything from me because I was never supposed to find out. And the Thompsons? They had to know something, maybe not all of it, but enough to accept a quiet check and move on. Still, I wasn't after revenge. I wasn't even sure what I wanted. I just needed to know him. To see if the hollow ache in my chest could be eased just by being near him. So I went back. Just a small step. I bought a book. Michael rang it up himself. "Great pick," he said with a warm smile. "These are getting harder to find." His voice. It had that ease, that familiarity that made my throat tighten. He handed me the bag, and for just a moment his fingers brushed mine. I asked him, "You own this place?" And he shrugged a little. "Kind of," he said. "My parents helped me get started. They're retired now, so I keep it running." Of course they did. He had support. Unlike Jason, who'd had nothing but me, my energy, my sacrifices, and still turned me into a punchline. Michael had parents who showed up. Jason had me, but didn't want what I gave. Life had mixed up the puzzle pieces and left us bleeding over the wrong ones. I started stopping by the store every few days. Sometimes I bought something, sometimes I just wandered the aisles. Michael began to recognize me. "Back again," he'd say, always with that easy smile. We chatted, nothing deep. Weather, favorite authors, whatever new events were coming to town. I still hadn't told him my name. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Back in the shadows of the life I had walked away from, though things were shifting. One day Jason sent me a single text. "Mom, are you okay?" That was it. 3 weeks of silence, and that's what he sent. I didn't reply. What was left to say? But I did start digging deeper. I pulled up the deed to the house. Still in my name. Emily had tried to refinance it without my approval. Denied. She couldn't afford it. Jason had no job. I could have had them evicted with a signature. But that would have been too quick, too clean. No, I needed them to feel the slow burn. I needed them to realize the floor under their feet didn't belong to them. It was mine. Every night I wrote. Carefully, methodically. My new journal was no longer about emotions. It was about facts. Every receipt, every interaction with Michael, every time he mentioned a favorite book or a memory from childhood, I wrote it all down. Not to use against him, but to learn about the son I never got the chance to raise. And somewhere in those pages the truth started to settle. Jason didn't disrespect me because he'd been switched at birth. He did it because he chose to. Because Emily gave him permission. Somewhere along the way he stopped seeing me as someone worthy of his respect and started seeing me as background noise. But Michael, he didn't even know me, and yet he treated me with more kindness in 5 minutes than Jason had in 5 years. I wasn't ready to tell him everything. But I was close. And when I did, it wouldn't just be some dramatic reveal. I was going to tell him everything. About the hospital, about the switch, about all the years that were stolen from us. Still, I had one thing left to witness before I could do that. I had to finish watching the collapse of the world I once called home. Because when the last piece fell, I wasn't looking back. I never imagined I'd become a ghost in my own story. But sometimes stepping out of the light is the only way to see people for who they really are. After that day in the bookstore, something inside me shifted. Not all at once, but slowly, like sunlight creeping across frozen ground. I didn't push it. I wasn't just trying to connect with the son I never knew. I was trying to reclaim the woman I used to be. I started walking taller, speaking clearer. I bought a used laptop and began typing out everything. Dates, names, screenshots. This wasn't journaling anymore. It was strategy. And one thing became absolutely clear. Jason and Emily's world was built on duct tape and lies. The house. Still legally mine. Emily's company, Emily Ascends. A facade. Fake testimonials, fake clients. A personal growth business built on hashtags, filters, and a leased luxury car they couldn't afford. I found the LLC. Checked tax filings. Again reviews. It was all curated, all image. Underneath, credit cards stretched to their limits. A defaulted loan. Jason's student debt still lingering. They were drowning and pretending they were floating. That's when I realized I didn't need to push hard. Just pull one thread and everything would unravel. But I wasn't there yet. Not quite. Because before that I had one last door to walk through. Michael. I kept going to the shop and he still had no idea who I was. But each conversation wore down the fear inside me. We talked about books, local coffee shops, noisy traffic, and good movies. And with every word I got closer to the moment I knew would change both of our lives forever. One afternoon we sat together at that tiny cafe next door, sipping tea, and Michael told me how he almost became a teacher once. But in the end his love for books pulled him toward business. At one point he looked at me and said, "You remind me of someone. I just can't figure out who." I smiled and said, "Maybe a librarian." He laughed, "Maybe." I held on to that moment for days. I didn't just like him, I recognized something in him. Not from the documents I'd read or the photograph Helen left behind, but from the way he moved through the world. The way he listened. The quiet steadiness in his voice. The gentleness in his posture. It felt familiar. It felt like mine. I started having dreams about the life I didn't get to live. Baking cookies together, cheering from the sidelines at his soccer games, helping with science fairs and packing lunchboxes. I could see it so clearly it made my chest hurt. But that life was gone. So I focused on what came next. First I called a lawyer, not for revenge but to take back what was rightfully mine. I wanted the house sold. I had paid every bill, covered every cost, and it had never been signed over to anyone else. Jason used to say, "We'll get it in your name later, no rush." Of course there was no rush, not for him. I was the one footing the bills. Now I wanted my name back. My rights. My dignity. I met with a lawyer downtown. A woman about my age, sharp, no nonsense. She listened without flinching. When I told her everything, she nodded once and said, "We'll file the motion this week." I signed the paperwork calmly, hands steady. That evening I walked past the house. Porch light glowing. Emily sat on the swing, scrolling on her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. Inside, Jason was on the couch, wrapped in a video game. They had no idea that the ground beneath them had already begun to crack. It wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. And when the house finally sold, they'd get a taste of what I'd lived with for years. Powerlessness. Maybe then they'd understand what it means to be thrown away. I didn't yell. I didn't bang doors. I just watched, waited, and quietly walked on. The first domino had tipped and they didn't even know it. I've always believed that silence is louder than shouting. That real strength lives in stillness. The kind that comes when you know deep in your bones that you're right. The day Jason and Emily got the official notice, I was at a little cafe near the courthouse, stirring honey into my tea with a peace I hadn't felt in years. My attorney told me the letter would land in their mailbox at 9 a.m. sharp. My phone buzzed. I just let it ring. I turned it face down on the table and let the silence speak for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to hear his voice. I just wasn't ready to hear another lie. Later that afternoon I checked my email. There it was, his message. Mom, what are you doing? Please call me. Emily is freaking out. Of course she was. The mortgage was due, and now they couldn't refinance because the woman they thought was too fragile to matter had been the one holding the deed all along. And they never saw it coming. A week later the phone rang again. Emily this time. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice tight, stretched thin. Linda, we really need to talk. This is all. It's a misunderstanding. Jason says you're going through something and we want to help, but you're putting our lives at risk and that's not fair. I listened to it twice. She called the house hers. And in that moment my silence became razor sharp. Deliberate. They still didn't get it. But they would. 2 days later Jason showed up at my apartment. I saw him through the peephole before he even knocked. Hair messy, dark circles under his eyes. A man unraveling. He knocked once then again and said softly, Mom, please don't do this. I stood behind the door, hand on the knob. But I didn't open it. I let him sit in that silence, the same kind of silence I had lived in for years. The following week my lawyer finalized the paperwork to officially list the house. I would receive the full profit. Every dollar, legally, ethically, emotionally, belonged to me. Emily tried to fight it. Claimed she'd contributed value. My attorney smiled and said, let's see her prove that in court. She couldn't. Because she never invested in anything but appearances. And now those appearances were falling apart. One filter at a time. Word got around. Her parents stopped liking her post. Clients started pulling away. She posted a video trying to explain why inheritance laws are outdated and unfair. But people saw right through it. Me. I said nothing. I just kept showing up at Michael's bookstore. One day over coffee we talked about a novel we both loved. He recommended a memoir. It's about grief, he said, but also about forgiveness. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I think you'd like it, he added. Maybe I would, I said. But not yet. Because I wasn't done grieving. Or forgiving. At home I began packing away old photos. Pictures of Jason as a baby, school portraits, birthdays where I did all the work but none of the celebrating. I didn't throw them out. I just put them away. Because the woman who gave everything, that version of me, she was gone. And the woman who had taken her place? She wasn't angry. She was wide awake. The last signature went down on the page. And just like that the story changed. The house was officially going on the market, and somewhere across town in that little green bookstore, my real son was laughing at something a customer had said, completely unaware that his life was about to shift too, only in the best possible way. Because not every loss is a tragedy. Some of them are just new beginnings wearing old clothes. I used to think masks were for costume parties, but Emily wore hers like a second layer of skin. Flawless, smiling, calculated. She always knew her angles, her tone, how to pose for a photo, how to sound just vulnerable enough online. But masks crack. And hers was about to split wide open. The idea hit me one morning while flipping through the local business directory. I already had a pile of personal dirt, maxed out credit, fake Instagram sponsorships, missed mortgage payments, but I wanted more than gossip. I wanted proof. So I hired a business consultant named Darren. Quiet, polished, discreet. I told him I needed a full audit of a small company. Nothing shady, just a private investigation. I handed him the name, Emily Ascends Uzi. A week later he gave me a folder thick with paper. What he'd found even surprised me. No tax returns filed in 2 quarters. Invoices faked to look like they came from real clients. Only the clients didn't exist. Photo shoots staged at Airbnbs she claimed were design projects. Fake affiliate deals with boosted engagement numbers. She wasn't just pretending to be successful, she was running a performance. I asked Darren if it would hold up under scrutiny. He said, if this hits daylight she's done. Professionally, financially. That same day I printed everything and found her parents' address. The same ones who once clinked their wine glasses in my kitchen while their daughter turned me into a joke. I sent the file anonymously. No return address. Just a typed note on top. Everything you think you know is an act. 2 days later, the first crack started to show. Emily's Instagram went dark. No stories. No staged lattes or morning mantras. Her last post, some quote about being misunderstood, was swarmed with odd comments. Then it all started to fall apart. Her website went offline. Her next empowerment event? Cancelled. Then I heard from an old neighbor that Emily's mother had stormed out of their house screaming into her phone, face beet red, purse flailing. I didn't need the details. I knew exactly what had happened. That night Jason called. I let it ring. His voicemail said, "Mom, I don't know what's going on. Emily's parents are furious. Someone sent them documents. They think we forged them. Was it you? Did you send it?" I didn't reply. He was finally seeing her. And maybe even seeing himself. He had stood beside a woman who dismantled everything I gave, starting with me. Let him sit with it. That same night I walked to the bookstore again. Michael was locking up. When he spotted me he smiled. "Back again," he said, unlocking the door. "You should probably just start working here." I smiled. Maybe I should. We ended up sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes of new paperbacks. He was sorting inventory. I joined him without asking. At one point he glanced at me. "Why do you come here?" he asked. Not accusing, just curious. I hesitated, then looked at him. He had my eyes. I hadn't noticed before. "Because I like the way it feels in here," I said. "Like nothing's pretending to be something it's not." He tilted his head, thoughtful. "Me too." We fell into a quiet rhythm after that. No more questions, just peace. But something settled between us. Not truth. Not yet. But something real. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt visible. The woman who once stood silent in her own kitchen, invisible in her own family? She was gone. In her place stood someone they never saw coming. Someone they never should have dismissed. I used to think heartbreak came like a thunderclap, sudden and loud. But sometimes it's slower than that, like water leaking drip by drip until one day the whole ceiling caves in. And Jason? He was finally standing in the middle of the flood. By then he knew. The house was listed. Emily's mask had shattered. Her fake empire was exposed. And with no one left to blame, Jason did what he always did. He came looking for me. I heard the knock before I saw him. It was a quiet afternoon and I was finishing a cup of tea. 3 soft taps. Hesitant. The kind of knock that doesn't know whether the door will open or slam shut. I opened it slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Unshaven, pale, shirt wrinkled like he'd pulled it from the floor. "Mom," he said, voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. Just stepped aside. He wandered into the room like a man who forgot how to be inside his own skin. We didn't speak for a while. Then softly he asked, "Why are you doing this? To us?" I let out a breath. Us. I sat down calmly across from him. "I'm not doing anything to you, Jason. I'm finally doing something for me." His jaw tensed. "You're selling the house. My house. I grew up there. I stayed steady. And you let your wife turn me into your housekeeper. You stood there and laughed. You never even apologized." He looked down. "I thought you were just being dramatic," he muttered. "I didn't realize it hurt you like that." I stared at him. "That's the problem, Jason. You never took the time to find out what hurt me. You just assumed I'd always be there, cleaning up your mess, paying your bills, nodding along while that woman chipped away at who I was." He winced. "Emily's not who I thought she was." "That's not news to me," I said. He looked up, eyes red. "I lost everything." I didn't blink. "No. You gave it away." Silence stretched between us like rope. "I miss you," he whispered. I sat a little straighter. "I raised you, fed you, gave up everything for you. And you let me be humiliated in the house I bought with my own hands." His lip quivered. "I thought she was helping me. I thought we were building something." "You built a lie," I said quietly. "And now it's falling apart." He stood up, started pacing. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" I got up, walked to the drawer by the kitchen and pulled out the envelope Helen had left me. I held it in both hands. I'm going to tell you something now, I said softly, and I need you to really listen. Jason gave a small, confused nod as I handed him the envelope. These are your birth records, I told him. He sat down slowly and began to open it, carefully unfolding the letter, the hospital files, the DNA test that Helen had quietly ordered all those years ago. His face shifted as he read, confusion then shock. This can't be real. It is, I said. You're saying I'm not your son? He asked, almost breathless. I'm saying you weren't born to me, I said gently, but I raised you like you were. I gave you every part of myself, even when you didn't want it. His face turned pale. So who is your real son? I didn't answer. He sat there frozen, the pages trembling in his hands. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. I met his eyes. Now you know how I felt. For years. And in that moment something inside him cracked. I saw it. And not with satisfaction but with peace. Because I had finally spoken what needed to be said. I walked him to the door. His expression was desperate. Can we fix this? I met his gaze and said honestly, I don't know. But it's not my job to try anymore. And I closed the door, not with bitterness but with finality. Because for the first time in my life I wasn't the one holding it open. It took me 3 more days to decide how I'd say it to Michael. I practiced the conversation in the mirror, in the car, even in the grocery store line, whispering, I'm your mother. There was a mistake. You've lived a life that wasn't meant to be yours. And so have I. But nothing sounded right. How do you hand someone a truth like that and expect them to survive the weight of it? So I had to try. Michael was at the bookstore just like always, the light falling through the windows in warm streaks, softening the room and casting shadows across the worn wooden floor. It felt sacred, like a place where honesty could live. He looked up, smiled. Hey. Perfect timing, we just got a rare poetry drop. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Actually, I came to talk. He studied me, reading the shift in my voice. Sure, he said. Come on back. He led me through a side door to the break room. Simple, mismatched furniture, a kettle, a couch that sagged in the middle. It was quiet. I've been coming here for a reason, I said, my hands twisting. I figured, he said gently. You're not exactly here for the books. I let out a quiet laugh. No, I'm not. Then I placed the envelope, the birth records, the test results, Helen's letter, on the table between us. What is this? He asked. Something that's going to change everything, I said. He looked at me, curious but calm. About 30 years ago, I began, voice breaking, there was a mistake at the hospital. 2 babies were switched at birth. His brow knit, confusion spreading across his face. My son, I said slowly, was given to another family. His body went still. And was given to me. He didn't speak. I raised him. I loved him with everything I had. But he didn't love me back. Not really. His eyes scanned mine. You think I nodded. I know you are. He picked up the envelope, his hands shaking. He read every page in silence. Helen's confession, the timeline, the proof. And when he finished, he didn't look at me. He just kept his fingers on the edges of the papers, like he needed something solid to hold on to. This is a lot, he finally said. I know. And you're Linda? Yes. He looked up, his eyes glossy. I don't feel anything. Not yet. You don't have to, I said. I'm not here to ask for anything. I needed you to know. He nodded slowly. Why now? Because silence was killing me. And the truth needed air. He leaned back, sighed. I have parents. They raised me well. I know. And I would never ask you not to love them. We sat there, surrounded by the scent of old paper and peppermint tea. And I felt relief. Not closure, not happiness, but the freedom of not carrying it alone anymore. After a while he stood, began pacing. I don't know what to do with this, he said. I don't either, I admitted. But I don't hate you. My eyes filled. That's more than I hoped for. He turned to me again. You didn't have to tell me. But you did. I didn't know how not to. He nodded again, something soft and mutual settling between us. Can we take this slow? He asked. I don't want to turn this into something forced. I wouldn't want anything else, I said. He smiled, faint, unsure but real. Want to stay for tea? I smiled back. I'd love to. We didn't talk about the files again that day. We talked about books, the weather, how he hated wind chimes but loved the sound of rain. The past was still there, heavy and raw, but we had opened a door. Not to a relationship, not yet, but maybe to something like a beginning. By the time autumn settled in, it wasn't just the trees that had changed. The house sold faster than expected. I got the full asking price. More than I imagined. Jason and Emily were given 30 days to move out. No grace period, no second chances. I didn't evict them out of anger. I did it because I needed the chains off. That house had become my cage. Watching them pack their curated life box by box. Pillows, plants, borrowed perfection. It was like watching a play get torn down. The illusion was over. When the moving truck pulled up, I drove past. I didn't stop. Just watched. Emily barked orders, sunglasses hiding whatever pride she had left. Jason paced the lawn, phone to his ear, circling like a man with nowhere left to go. I wondered if he ever thought this day would come, and if he knew I would be the one to bring it. Their fall wasn't loud. No big scandals, no tabloid mess. But it was absolute. Emily's parents cut her off. Her sponsors disappeared. Her brand, once polished, now whispered about. The woman who once laughed at me in my own kitchen couldn't afford her organic skincare or her $12 matcha anymore. Jason tried to find work, any work. But with no degree, no real resume, doors stayed shut. He moved into a small rental at the edge of town. I didn't ask. My lawyer told me. And I didn't celebrate. This was never about revenge. It was about reality. Meanwhile, my life began to quietly bloom. Michael and I kept meeting. Coffee, articles, favorite poems, random thoughts about life. He once asked about my writing and I told him I'd started a memoir. You should keep going, he said. Stories like that matter. He still didn't call me Mom. I never expected him to. That wasn't the point. What we were building wasn't obligation, it was choice. And that made all the difference. One afternoon we walked through the farmer's market. He picked up a jar of apple butter and smiled. My mom used to make this every fall. The way he said my mom, it didn't sting. Felt okay. Because he had a mom. And I had a son who didn't see me until it was too late. Some nights I sat alone, sipping tea, wondering if Jason was sleeping on a mattress or a floor. If Emily still wore silk robes. If they finally saw each other clearly now that the filters had fallen. I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of what we were supposed to be. But that grief, it fades. Slowly. Like a shadow at dusk. And pride begins to grow, especially when you start loving yourself more than you loved their approval. I walked my old neighborhood one last time before the sale closed. Not to haunt it. Just to say goodbye. I passed Jason's old school, the park with the swings, the grocery store where I once clipped coupons to buy his favorite cereal. And I let it all go. I had given my whole life to a family that never gave back. And now I was offering something to someone who might never call me Mom, but who looked at me with something better. Respect, gentleness, curiosity. Sometimes you don't need redemption. You just need peace. And for the first time in my life I was starting to feel it. It was early November when I got his message. Just 5 words. Can we meet? Just once. I stared at the message for a long time. It had been weeks since I'd seen Jason. Weeks of silence, of distance that felt heavier than any fight we'd ever had. But something in his words didn't feel angry or desperate. It felt like surrender. We agreed to meet at a quiet park on the edge of town, the kind with old benches and a dirt path circling a half-dry pond. I chose that place because it held no memories. No weight. No ghosts. He was already sitting when I arrived, elbows on his knees, eyes on the ground. When he looked up, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, uncertain, waiting for something he couldn't name. I sat beside him, not too close. He cleared his throat. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. I nodded. I wanted to understand. I reached into my bag and pulled out the same manila envelope, Helen's letter, the records, the test. I handed it to him without a word. He didn't open it. Just held it in his lap like he already knew what was inside. I did a test of my own, he said after a while. Same result. I nodded again. I spent weeks trying to figure out what that meant, he continued. If I wasn't your son, then what was I? I looked at him, really looked, and said quietly, You were my child. But I treated you like one. I know how you treated me. He winced. I'm not here for forgiveness, he said quickly. I don't deserve it. You don't, I said. But that doesn't mean I hate you. His voice caught. Then what does it mean? I took a breath. It means I finally love myself more than I loved the idea of you. The silence between us filled every inch of air. He lowered his head. I thought I was protecting Emily, standing by her. But I was just hiding behind her, wasn't I? I nodded. You handed her the pen and let her write my story for you. I wish I could undo it. You can't. We sat there quietly, two people unraveling a shared life under November skies. Then he said something I never expected. I hope he's good to you. I blinked. Michael, he clarified. Your son. My throat tightened. He's kind, I said. Gentle. Jason gave a faint smile. I guess some of that came from you. We both laughed softly, not out of joy but not bitterness either. I don't want to stay in your life if it hurts you, he said. But, if there's ever a space for me, just a corner of it. He trailed off and he didn't need to finish. I stood and looked out at the pond. Leaves drifted across the surface like ash. I'll think about it, I said. He nodded. That's more than I hoped for. As I turned to go, I placed my hand on his shoulder. Just for a moment. It wasn't closure. But it was something close. And that was enough. Because I didn't need to fix him anymore. I didn't need to fix myself either. I just needed to be free. And I finally was. Freedom. It had always felt like a word too big for me. Something you saw in parades or heard in speeches. Not something someone like me ever actually lived. But the morning I unlocked the front door of Michael's bookstore, I understood it for the first time. He had called the night before, his voice calm but something beneath it pulled at me. I want to show you something, he said. When I walked in, he was standing by the back wall beneath a new wooden sign arched over a doorway. It read, "The next chapter." I smiled. What's this? He handed me a single brass key. It's a new space, he said. Cozy reading room, coffee corner, community talks. I want it to be more than a store. I want it to feel like belonging. I turned the key over in my hand. You want me to open it? I want you to have it, he said, serious now. You gave everything to someone who treated you like you were invisible. But I see you. I don't need you to prove anything. You already have. Tears welled up in my eyes. You don't have to do this. I know, he said. But I want to. I walked to the door and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. Inside was warm and soft, with tall windows spilling light across the shelves. Half the books were already in place. Memoirs, classics, stories that mattered. There was a rug in the middle. A worn armchair. A little table with a teapot. It felt like stepping into a dream I didn't know I'd had. I turned around, speechless. Michael, he smiled. It's yours. As long as you want it. I walked to the center of the room and stood still, breathing it in, the scent of wood, ink, and possibility. That night, I sat in the apartment one last time with my old notebook open to its final page. And I wrote, I was a woman who gave until I disappeared. Then I became a woman who took it all back. Not with rage, not with fire, but with silence, with truth, and with a strength they never saw coming. The next day I finalized the donation. A portion of the money from the house sale went to a foundation that helps women start over. Women who've been overlooked, underestimated, left behind. Just like I was. They called to thank me. But I didn't need thanks. Because every time I step into that bookstore, into that new chapter, I remember exactly who I am. Not Jason's mother. Not Emily's maid. But Linda Walker. A woman. A survivor. The author of her own ending. I never needed permission to begin again. Just a key. And now I had it in my hand. And this time it didn't open someone else's door. It opened mine. Thanks for listening. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe. And if you've ever felt invisible, unwanted, or underestimated, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. It always has.